I'm Steve Combs, and this is the News Guardian Report, podcast number 4.
Thanks for joining in, everybody. Thank you, Steve, for being here. Tonight we're going to talk about the Kavanaugh hearings and the rule of law and how this pertains to the case.
Sure, thank you. Well, without going into all of the details, Judge Kavanaugh's nomination for the Supreme Court cleared the Senate Judiciary Committee today, and will go to the full Senate next week for a vote. I'd like to talk a little bit about this nomination and the rule of law, and a concern that I have that we are drifting away from it, and the serious implications if we don't stop this. If people have been watching these hearings the last couple of days, I think a reasonable person can't conclude anything but that it was just a real circus, just a comedy of errors. It was really atrocious. In fact, there was a great movie that illustrates this point very well. It's called 12 Angry Men, story written by Reginald Rose and directed and starring Henry Fonda. And the story is about a young fellow who is charged with murdering his father. The jury comes into the jury room, and 11 of these jurors are ready to take a vote right away to convict him and send him to the electric chair. They've got things to do. They want to get out of there. But one juror says, "Wait a minute, let's look at this." And then the movie goes on to explain the rule of law and how you have to have evidence to convict.
I'm telling you, some of you people in here must be out of your minds. A kid like that.
I don't think the kind of boy he is has anything to do with it. The facts are supposed to determine the case.
Don't give me that. I'm sick and tired of facts. You can twist them any way you like. You know what I mean?
Our rule of law goes back 800 years to the Magna Carta, which King John signed in 1215. A lot of people think that our rule of law, our system of government, goes only back to our Declaration of Independence, but it really goes all the way back to the Magna Carta, which gave rights to British subjects that they had not had before. The kings were truly the rulers, and they were the dictators.
Interesting.
And so the common people had enough of it, and they said, we want this, and they put pressure on the king, and so he signed it. And the basics of that have followed and stayed with us all of this time. And one of those tenets, if that's what you would call it, under the rule of law, is that somebody charged with a crime is innocent until and unless proven guilty.
And not guilty until proven innocent.
And not the other way around.
You can't send someone off to die on evidence like that.
And so what we have seen in these last couple of weeks is a lot of posturing by senators who wish to keep Judge Kavanaugh off the Supreme Court, and trying to turn that around and saying, no, he is guilty until he proves himself innocent. And that is very dangerous.
It's a slippery slope.
It is a slippery slope. Now, the real motivation is that they just don't want him on the Supreme Court. But rather than argue the merits about his judicial temperament, how he has ruled on cases in his 12 years as an appeals court judge, how he feels about certain constitutional principles, his sticking to originalism in the Constitution rather than activism in judicial rulings, that kind of thing. There was some of that during the original hearings, but in these last 2 days, where these allegations have come forth by this professor in California who said that he molested her when they were in high school 36 years ago. Her supporters are saying, including people on the Judiciary Committee, are saying Judge Kavanaugh must prove himself innocent. This Professor Ford does not have the obligation to present evidence or prove that he's guilty. And if this is why he is ultimately barred from taking a seat on the Supreme Court, then we have an extremely dangerous precedent, because the next person who comes up, it will only be necessary to make the charge.
Yeah.
And there is an argument among some people, on the feminist left, to be honest, that says no, a woman's accusation against a man is sufficient enough. That establishes guilt. Mm-hmm. We should believe the woman. And the real problem is that sexual crimes are very hard to prove. Mm-hmm. I don't have numbers on this, but I suspect that the solve rate for sex crimes is much lower than it is for burglary, for example. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's one of the prices you pay for having to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that somebody is guilty of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon, maybe you don't fully understand the term reasonable doubt.
What do you mean, I don't understand?
And I think it was William Blackstone, who was a jurist in England back in the 1700s, who came up with this original statement that it is far better to acquit 10 guilty men than to convict one innocent man. And that line has been picked up and used many times. I believe Justice Harlan used it in a Supreme Court case. And so that has been our judicial philosophy in this country really forever, since the founding, and that's to protect the innocent. And the price we pay for that is that a lot of crimes go a lot of people are not convicted of things they did, and that's very unfortunate. But how would you like to, you yourself or have somebody in your family sent to prison for something they didn't do?
Oh, terrible. Be a horrible thing.
I remember I was reading just today about this fellow, and now I can't remember his name, but who spent 35 years in a prison in Montana for a murder that he did not commit. And he eventually got out after very many years of people working to make that happen. But can you imagine 35 years? Beach was the guy's name. And so you can't, you can give him money, but you can't give him back.
You can't give back the time.
35 years. And I remember another case where these three fellows in Illinois did 17 years in Illinois State Prison for a murder they did not commit. And so we have had to make the choice in this country. Do we want maximum convictions for people who committed crimes, or do we want maximum protections for those? And the trade-off is that you're going to acquit some guilty people.
Yeah.
And that's and so here we come to the Kavanaugh hearings. And if a person's just a mere accusation of something that she cannot prove,
is deemed credible. Yeah,
that's right. She named 3 witnesses, friends of hers, who she said were there. They have all 3 not only failed to corroborate her charge, but refute it. Said no, it did not happen. And yet this nomination has been upheld because of that.
Wow. Well, where do we go from here?
Well, I think that I think it's like, this is the way I think, like everything else, it comes down to education. This is a failure of our educational system, and we just have to do a better job in high school, especially in teaching civics and government. I think if you go out here on the street and do a survey of young people and ask them, which is it? Are you guilty until you prove yourself innocent, or are you innocent until proven guilty? A lot of people would not get that right. And I think that is really what it is. I mean, we could spend a whole segment talking about civics and education, but the civics, the ignorance of U.S. government among a lot of people in this country is exceeded only by their economic ignorance, and that is profound.
It is profound. Maybe that's something we can pick up next week on
I hope so.
our next podcast.
And maybe we'll get some viewers to comment.
I think we'll post that that poll at the end of this video. We can have our viewers.
Yeah, sure. That would be a great idea.
Pick from a list. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks everybody for watching. Catch us next week on podcast number 5, and we'll catch you next time.
Okay, and I'm Steve Combs reporting for the News Guardian.